talk a little bit more about what it means for the Fever. This year she's making $1 million, which means MHA is probably on a minimum. Which is, by the way, if she's on a minimum, that's one of the best contracts in the WNBA. I mean that when I say that. Like, she is one of the best contracts. MHA on a minimum. Like, I get it, she wasn't good last year for Dallas, but she was still on a damn max. Like, how you can get a player for a minimum who's just come off a max? It was like Erica Wheeler being on a minimum last year because she just had an iffy season.
Aliyah Boston has signed the largest contract in WNBA history, a 4-year, $6.3 million deal with the Indiana Fever that surpasses Aja Wilson's previous record by $1.3 million. The annual breakdown sees Boston earning $1 million in the current season, with the remaining $5.3 million spread across the following 3 years at roughly $1.77 million per year. The structure is a supermax extension, and while Boston's per-year earnings match Wilson's, the total length pushes the overall value above anything the league has seen before.
Because she just had an iffy season for the Indiana Fever. That being said, like, the situation now with Aliyah is there is a standard that Aliyah's got to be at. Like, Aliyah's got to be perennial all WNBA. I think she's got to be. I think she got better this offseason. And I don't see that being any sort of an issue. She's got to be she's got to be an MVP candidate. A perennial MVP candidate. And yeah, you can see why they're not going to be able to afford Kelsey.
The basketball question the contract raises is not about whether Boston has earned it. Her resume makes that difficult to dispute, but about what it means for the Fever's ability to construct a competitive roster around her and Caitlin Clark over the next several years. The cap math is the central concern, with Boston locked in at those figures, and Maisha Hines-Allen likely occupying a minimum slot. Boston and Billings alone are projected to consume close to 40% of the salary cap in the near term.
See why they're not going to be able to afford Kelsey Mitchell. Assuming, even if Caitlin takes a pay cut, Caitlin will have to probably take the minimum. Like, Aliyah, if I'm not mistaken, like, Aliyah, it's 6.3 million, and this year is 1 million. So the next years are 5.3 million a year. So let's just go to, let's just go to calculator. Let's go 5.3 million. 1, 2, 3.
If Clark signs a supermax or even a standard max, which seems likely given the precedent just set the two stars together, would account for nearly 37% of cap space on their own. That leaves the remaining roster spots to be filled almost entirely with minimum contract players, which puts enormous pressure on the front office to find productive contributors at the lowest possible price points. The departure of Kelsey Mitchell is now widely viewed as a near certainty given those constraints.
3, 4. No, why did I say 5.3? 5.3 million divided by 3. And she's making 1.7 million a year on average for over the last 3 years of her contract. The likelihood is that Aliyah, Lexi, and Monique Billings are going to be making $3 million of the salary.
The Fever will not realistically be able to retain her alongside both Boston and Clark at their respective salary levels. Lexi Hull's long-term future with the franchise is similarly in question, with analysts suggesting the current core of Clark, Boston, and Hull is unlikely to remain intact past the next contract cycle. The broader skepticism about Indiana's title prospects under this structure ties into questions about the front office's scouting and roster-building capabilities.
And Monique Billings are going to be making $3 million of the salary cap next year, combined. Let's say the salary raises by $1 million. Those 3 players are still going to take up a solid close to 40% of the salary cap. Like, it's not an ideal situation at all. And when you've got 2 role players and albeit a star, like, we're not going to say Aliyah's anything other than a star, if not a superstar in this league.
Winning with a salary cap structure this top-heavy requires organizations to be exceptionally skilled at identifying value in international markets and among lower-compensated players finding contributors who outperform their contracts. The Fever have not historically demonstrated that kind of operational depth. The Raven Johnson selection, reportedly influenced in part by a scout's impression of South Carolina's practice culture rather than any advanced analytical model, reinforced the perception that Indiana's draft and development infrastructure lags behind the league's better-run franchises.
We're not going to say Aliyah is anything other than a star, if not a superstar in this league. But like for me, this contract is a wild one. It's like they wanted to make her the highest paid player in history in order for taking a 200k pay decrease this year. And look, we've got a lot of players willing to take that pay cut. Kelsey Plum's been willing to take that pay cut. A lot of players are willing to take that $1 million pay cut without having to get a 4-year-long supermax. 4-year-long supermax is...
On the Clark contract front, the working assumption among analysts is that she will sign a 3-year deal once eligible. The strategic implication of a 3-year rather than 4-year commitment is that team control expires sooner, giving Clark optionality at a relatively young age. If the Fever's trajectory does not improve meaningfully in that window, both she and Boston could plausibly explore free agency around the same time.
4-year-long supermax or a 3-year supermax after this. This is obviously why Kelsey Mitchell is not going to be there next year. And you've now got a situation where it is Caitlin and Aliyah. And I don't know if that's going to be enough. Like, I don't think that's going to be enough to win a title. I really don't think. Caitlin Clark and Aliyah Boston.
The prediction being floated is that neither player remains in Indiana past age 28 if the organization's current direction continues unchanged. Stephanie White's recent comments about Caitlin Clark's training camp workload have drawn significant attention, primarily because they echo a familiar pattern from the previous season, one where the coaching staff appeared to prioritize other players' roles in the offensive structure over maximizing Clark's impact. In a recent interview, White addressed the question of Clark's return from injury and her preparation for the new season.
I don't think that's going to be enough to win a title. I really don't think Caitlin Clark and Aliyah Boston is going to be enough to win a title. And now you've got a situation where you're not really going to be able to get much depth. Like, Caitlin's going to have to take a pay cut, and the following year, they're not going to be able to afford Lexi Hull. Like, the Fever are not running back the big three next year. They're not going to be it's going to be Caitlin, Aliyah, and friends. And by
Clark herself had been vocal throughout the USA basketball window, stating clearly and repeatedly that she felt fully healthy and ready to compete at the highest level. Her performance during the FIBA World Cup qualifying period backed that up. She was arguably the standout player across the entire competition, earning MVP recognition and demonstrating the kind of up-tempo, high-volume playmaking that defines her game when given full latitude. White's framing was noticeably different.
Pretty much signaling to us that this was Kelsey's team. Now, a lot of people saying Caitlin Clark could be possibly getting ready to break some bad news to a lot of Indiana Fever front office and fans. Could she demand a trade after this year? I don't know. But the way they moving, it looked like that they are preparing themselves for if so. I just got to be honest. Now, Stephanie White did an interview yesterday.
She acknowledged that Clark had worked extensively during the offseason and that her participation in international competition gave her an advantage in terms of game conditioning and rhythm. But the coach then pivoted to language around managing her reps, being smart with her workload in camp, and ramping her up gradually. The stated reasoning was the length of the WNBA season and the compressed game schedule, 44 games played at a heavy weekly cadence.
Yesterday. Now, in this interview, we ain't going to play it all because we already reacted to a bunch of it. I want you guys to hear something. Listen to this real quick. And after I play this, let me know how y'all feel.
Riddick, the other day when he said there won't be an update, right, until there's an update.
Right. I mean, I get it, right? It's that catch-22, right? Because people want to ask, but at the same time, there's no. But having said that, what is the time period or the acclimation, if you will, not just for her, but also the teammates around, or although is it advanced?
The issue with that reasoning is that it conflicts with what Clark demonstrated on the floor just weeks prior. Managing the reps of a player who just earned MVP honors at an international tournament and explicitly said she was at full capacity is a strange choice. If the decision were purely about physical precaution, it would be easier to accept.
But also the teammates around, or although, is it advantage because you have a lot of new faces, so it's new for everybody?
Yeah, I think it's new for everybody. I think we got to be smart. She has worked her butt off this whole off season to prepare herself. We have an added advantage in that she played games in March, right, with USA Basketball. And so she has game exposure. She has game pace. She has game rhythm. She has game timing. And so we have an advantage. But we also want to be smart. She doesn't need every rep in practice. Like, we want to continue to ramp her up. You know, it's a long season.
But coming alongside earlier comments from White about building the offense around Kelsey Mitchell, describing Mitchell as the player who could generate her own shot without assistance, and framing her as the top priority, it raises legitimate questions about the team's offensive philosophy. Mitchell is an excellent player, and her return from injury is genuinely important for the Fever's prospects.
In practice, like we want to continue to ramp her up. You know, it's a long season, 44 games, and we play a heavy cadence of games in a week, and so we want to be smart in camp and make sure we I don't want to say ease her into it, because she.
Now, this right here ain't sit right with me, because this is insinuating to me that she plans on doing something a little different with Caitlin Clark. Now, Caitlin Clark stated during FIBA World Cup,
but the decision to position her as the offensive anchor while simultaneously limiting Clark's reps in camp creates a structure that does not obviously serve the team's best interests. Clark's impact at full capacity, running pace, initiating offense, forcing help rotations is what elevates this roster from a playoff team to a genuine contender.
World Cup basketball, she was 100% ready to go. I think we heard her say that numerous times, bro. Hell, we seen Caitlin Clark ball. Why is we limiting Caitlin Clark for the start of the season? Why? Or going into training camp. Why is you limiting her? Because you're trying to get the ball out of her hand, bro.
Managing her into a lesser role in the name of load management, when she has just proven she needs none, reads as an organizational preference rather than a medical necessity. The clips from the international window are relevant context here.
She's trying to do everything in her power to make sure Caitlin Clark does not reach the level which we already know she's there. Judging off what we've seen in FIBA World Cup basketball, Caitlin Clark was ready to go, and she stated to the world that she was ready to go. She looked it like she was ready to go. Hell, she won the MVP. She was the best player out there in the entire FIBA World Cup basketball. I don't know. Let's finish listening.
She's ready for camp, but
Clark was running the floor, hitting pull-up threes off screen actions, finishing coast-to-coast on transition plays, and operating as a primary creator for a USA roster full of talented players. None of that footage looked like a player who needed her reps carefully rationed in a training camp setting.
Listening.
She's ready for camp, but we want to make sure that we manage, the reps and what kinds of reps she's getting, just to build her up so that she's ready to go, and we don't have any kind of questions about that.
You know, I got to thinking about this, Stephanie. Stephanie White, the head coach of the Fever, my guest. If situations arise again where people start asking the same question repeatedly, and you get to the JJ Redick level, right?
Yeah.
Then I think you bring your phone and you just hit this. As soon as they ask, you just hit this on your phone, right? There you go.
The Fever have now entered their second season under White with questions about whether Clark will be given the freedom to fully control an offense, or whether the system will continue to distribute responsibility across multiple guards, and White did, a way that reduces her overall involvement. Last season, the team's best stretches came in moments when Clark was permitted to push pace and make quick decisions.
There you go.
I
You just
agree.
played that, right?
I agree. Can you have that as like a favorites that just comes up, or is it like Siri play you need to calm down?
Well, then it kind of kills the mystique if you're saying the title, right? Because then everybody can figure out what you're talking about.
Yeah, amen. That's
hey,
true.
in your coaching off season, you obviously were doing both radio and television for, in basketball, the NBA, and a number of areas. What was the best game you saw in the?
So that was some of Stephanie White interview that she did yesterday. Now,
the post-Olympic stretch, where her usage increased significantly, was the clearest illustration of what this roster looks like when she is the unambiguous centerpiece. Whether that version of the Fever shows up consistently in 2025 will depend heavily on whether the coaching staff moves away from the cautious, rep-managed approach White described.